Doing a dopamine fast or detox has become more and more popular over the years. What was originally considered to be purely pseudoscience is now considered to be a somewhat valid tool that can be used to reestablish baseline dopamine levels, which is great if you are struggling with motivation. Today I want to rank the many things that you could avoid during a fast. The S tier is for things that everyone should avoid during their fast. The A tier is for things that most people should avoid. The B tier is for things that only some people should avoid. And finally, we have the do not do tier, which is reserved for things that you should not avoid during your fast. With that being said, let's jump right in. First up on our list, we have social media. This is the biggest time sink in our day-to-day lives outside of work. In fact, the poll was conducted which found that over a third of young adults spend more than 8 hours per day on social media. Not only that, but many of the social media apps, especially TikTok, are designed to make our brains release as much dopamine as possible over a long period of time. They do this by making their algorithm randomly rewarding. Basically, they put in content that they know you won't like, just to make the dopamine high stronger when you do find a video you do like. This is the same psychological trick that casinos use when designing their games to make them more addictive. So yes, this goes high up in the S tier. You should be avoiding all social media during a dopamine fast, except for maybe some messenger apps needed for work. Next up, we have gaming. Gaming is quickly becoming the most popular form of entertainment in the world. It is one of the biggest time sinks, and it's also one of the most stimulating. A study conducted in 1998 found that gaming increases dopamine levels by up to 100% during play. So it's safe to say that it's something you should be avoiding during a dopamine fast, especially if you are someone who already spends a lot of time every day playing games, which is why I'm placing it into the S tier. Then we have drinking water. It's important to remember that technically everything you do releases dopamine, so it's actually impossible to completely avoid it for an entire day, which is why I think it's a bit extreme when people try to avoid water on the day of the fast. I would not suggest anyone go on a 24-hour water fast, as it is risky to go through the entire day without any water. Your brain function will most likely suffer, so any reflection work you planned on doing might get impeded. Your self-control would also decrease as you are put under the additional stress of being thirsty all day, which can make it hard to stick to the rest of the things you are trying to avoid. So I'm putting this into the do not do tier. Do not avoid water during a dopamine fast. Which actually brings us to the next thing on our list, eating junk food, which includes drinking soda and other sweetened beverages as well as any processed foods. Most of these types of foods have a ton of added sugars in them. When you consume sugar, your brain releases a huge amount of dopamine. It's even been compared to the spikes seen from drug use. On top of that, fast foods are designed to make you want to eat more and more. Companies split test hundreds of little things, from the way they cook the fries to the amount of salt they put on, to maximize the amount of dopamine their food releases to make you want to go back for more the next time you feel hungry. So this is definitely something I'd put into the S tier. Next up, we have socializing. Now, although hanging out with people does release a good amount of dopamine, I think this is something that is perfectly healthy to do even during a dopamine fast, especially in our modern day society where the majority of us are probably not getting enough social interaction to begin with. Personally, I would put this into the B tier. It is something you could do if you are someone who hangs out with people all the time for hours on end every day. But if that's not you and you only speak with people for less than an hour a day, I don't think it really makes sense to avoid them just for this reason. Next up, we have smoking, which includes tobacco, vapes, and weed. All three of these activities spike your dopamine levels, especially vaping. You see, vaping is much more accessible than smoking, so you can do it anywhere at any time, which causes people to do it all day without even thinking about it. This can lead to long-term issues with one's dopamine receptors. A study found that smokers have 15 to 20% less capacity for dopamine production compared to people who don't smoke at all. So I'm placing this into the S tier. Definitely avoid smoking during your fast. Next up, we have working out. Now, your body does get flooded with a bunch of feel-good hormones and chemicals, including dopamine, while you work out. But I think it's fine because the majority of us are not getting enough physical activity to begin with. If your goal is to increase your levels of motivation and energy, then while doing a dopamine detox can be helpful, regularly working out is probably even more helpful. Overall, I would put this into the B tier. It is something that you probably should do during your fast, but the key is to make sure you are working out without listening to music or using your phone, because doing any form of multitasking increases the amount of dopamine released drastically. Next up, we have eating normal, healthy food. Now, eating food does release dopamine before and during the meal. Personally, I do avoid food during my dopamine fast, but I am also someone who has done multiple day food fasts before, so not eating food for just one day isn't crazy at all for me. If you've never gone a day without food before, I would suggest you speak with your family doctor, do some research, and try it out on its own away from the dopamine fast, as it is something that you have to get used to mentally. Personally, I would put this in the low A tier. It is something that has a whole lot of benefits outside of the dopamine aspect, and you can always opt for something less extreme, such as eating just one meal instead of 3 like you usually do. Then we have watching shows, which includes binge watching things on Netflix and anime. Now, depending on what you're watching, the dopamine levels released will differ vastly. Binge watching an entire season of an exciting TV show will stimulate you much more than watching a slow-paced documentary about nature. Overall, I would place this into the A tier. It is something that everyone should avoid during their fast, but if you're really looking to learn something specific on that day, you could watch an educational episode, but probably not more than 1 or 2 episodes. Now, if you're watching something educational, you're probably doing it online, which actually brings us to the sponsors of today's video, NordPass. We often use the same password for many of our online accounts. If any of these accounts experience a data breach, then all of your other accounts become at risk. Here's where the zero-knowledge password manager like NordPass comes in. NordPass allows you to set strong, unique passwords for each account. It automatically fills them in whenever you're trying to sign in. NordPass works on up to 6 of your devices at the same time. They also allow you to store sensitive documents within the app. And because they are zero knowledge, no one can see what's in your encrypted vault, not even the NordPass team. On top of that, they automatically check for any data breaches so that you can be informed and react quickly when something does happen. They have 2 special offers for you today. If you'd like to try out their personal service, you can go to nordpass.com/improvementpill NordPass or use coupon code improvementpill NordPass at checkout to get 2 years of NordPass and additional 1 month free. For those of you who run a business or are part of a team, you can also share passwords with other team members in a safe way, instead of doing so on a messenger app, which is much riskier. If this is you, you can get a 3-month free trial of NordPass by visiting nordpass.com/improvementpillbusiness or using coupon code improvementpillbusiness. Now back to the topic at hand. Next, we have drinking alcohol. Now, getting drunk releases a ton of dopamine. It's fun and all, especially when socializing. But if you're trying to reset your baseline dopamine levels, you definitely should avoid it, which is why I'm placing it into the S tier. Fun fact, alcohol increases dopamine levels in men much more than women. Next, we have reading fiction. If you spend all day reading fiction novels or stories online, then yeah, you probably should avoid reading more fiction during a dopamine fast, and this is because the fact that you enjoy it means that a lot more dopamine is being released before and during the activity. So overall, I would put this into the A tier. On the other hand, we have reading nonfiction. This is technically less stimulating than reading fiction, but there are people out there who genuinely enjoy reading nonfiction. If this is you, then just like with fiction, I do think you should avoid it for the dopamine fast. Overall, I would put it into the A tier as well if you enjoy it, and the B tier if it's not something you really do. Also, one important thing to note is that reading a physical book has been shown to release less dopamine than reading something online, because when you are reading things online, there's a bunch of stuff that you can click on, a bunch of other articles, links, ads, things like that, all of which causes more dopamine to be released as compared to sitting down and focusing on a single subject like you would while reading a non-fiction book. So if you want to read during your fast, make it a physical book. Next up, we have listening to music. This does release a ton of dopamine, especially if it's the type of music that you like. But I think it really depends on what type of person you are. If you're someone who listens to music a lot all day, every day, then yes, you probably would benefit by taking a break during your dopamine fast. If you're someone who doesn't really listen to music like that, I think it's fine to listen to a few songs while going on a walk or doing some chores during the fast. So overall, I would put this into the B tier. Next up, we have drinking coffee, which is a tricky one. You see, caffeine has multiple effects on dopamine. It slows down the rate of dopamine reabsorption, similar to how cocaine works, but at the same time, according to Andrew Huberman, ingesting about 100 milligrams of caffeine every day increases the amount of dopamine receptors that you have, which in the long term can be good for motivation. Personally, my take is this. If you are someone who drinks caffeine every day, to the point where avoiding it for a single day may give you withdrawal symptoms, I'd say that it's okay to drink it during the dopamine fast because you don't want to spend the whole day irritable and tired. If, however, you are not that addicted to caffeine, I would suggest you avoid it during the fast because of the fact that it does spike your dopamine levels by quite a lot. So overall, I would put it into the lower A tier. Next up, we have work. I would put this into the do not avoid tier. The reason you are probably doing the dopamine fast to begin with is because you want to improve your focus and feel more motivated so that you can get more work done. So doing work during a dopamine fast will force your mind to look at work as one of the only stimulating things you have available, which sort of trains your mind to enjoy it a bit more. Then we have listening to a podcast. This is similar to reading. Now, if it's an entertaining podcast, I would put it into the A tier. But if it's an educational podcast, I would put it into the B tier, and only if you are focusing on the podcast and not multitasking. Because multitasking essentially stacks different sources of dopamine on top of each other. Then we have playing with yourself, which includes watching naughty videos online and doing the deed. You know what I'm talking about. I think we all know that this is one of the most stimulating things out there other than drugs, and the fact that most people do this for extended periods of time makes it really bad for your baseline dopamine, because the exposure is so strong and for so long. So of course, this goes into the S tier, the high S tier, no question. Then we got planning or writing. I actually think that this is something that most people should be doing during their dopamine fast because most people never do this. When you are on a fast, you suddenly have a lot of free time, and it is okay to fill some of that time with activities that will get you closer to where you want to be in life. So sitting down for an hour and reflecting on your life, planning out exactly what you want to do the next day, and things like this is usually a good idea. I know there are some people out there that excessively plan and never do anything about it. If that's you, then maybe don't spend too much time on this. But if you're like most other people, I think it's a good idea. So overall, I'm putting it into the B tier. Then we have a hobby, something like playing an instrument, drawing, dancing, or playing a sport. It's up to you whether or not you want to avoid these during your dopamine fast, because the fact that you enjoy these things does mean that they release a lot of dopamine for you. But if getting better at your hobby is one of the goals you have, then it doesn't hurt to spend some time on it. Overall, I would put this into the high B tier. I personally do spend an hour or two dancing every time I go on a dopamine fast, because for me, the fast is much more about getting away from technology than anything else. Then we have thinking about the past. Now, I think this is something that you inevitably will do throughout the day if you do a dopamine fast. It's not really something you can avoid. Now, of course, you don't want to be replaying bad memories as a way to pass time during the fast, because every time you replay a bad memory, it becomes easier to recall. The negative implications and beliefs tied to that memory become stronger. What you do want to do is think about some good moments from the past, or reflect on some mistakes you've made and think about what lessons can be learned. This is something that you can pair up with writing. In fact, I suggest you do write and reflect on your life during a dopamine fast. Overall, I would put this into the B tier, as I do think it's something you should be doing during your fast, but only for a bit. In a similar light, we have daydreaming. Now, there are two types of daydreaming here. There's the fantasy one, where you are dreaming about stuff that is impossible, such as becoming a superhero and saving the world. Those I would say you should avoid. The other form, which is daydreaming about where you'll be in the near future if you stick to good habits and get your stuff together, that form of daydreaming I would say is okay. And just like with thinking about the past, I do think you should pair this up with some sort of writing. You should write about what this ideal future looks and feels like. This will motivate you to take action the following day. So overall, I would put this into the B tier. Then we have gambling. This is a clear S tier. Gambling of any sort spikes dopamine widely. I don't think there's much else to say about that. So next up, we have the cold shower. So interestingly enough, taking a cold shower does release a lot of dopamine, along with a bunch of other feel-good chemicals. Personally, I would take a cold shower because it jolts me awake for the rest of the day. So I would put this into the B tier. You could avoid it if you want, but I think it's fine because it's a one-time thing and it's a great way to start the day. It fills you with energy to take on all the stuff you want to do for the rest of the day. And finally, we have meditation. I would definitely recommend that you meditate for two reasons. The first is to train your ability to appreciate the present moment. We turn to things like social media and other sources of dopamine because we are unable to find pleasure from just existing in the moment. But I can assure you that it's possible. You sort of just have to train this ability to appreciate the things and sensations that are happening around you. And meditating during a dopamine fast can help you get a taste of that. The second reason I recommend meditation is because it trains your ability to focus, which is one of the things that people are trying to get from dopamine fasts in general. Overall, I would put this into the do not do tier, as it is something you definitely should do during your dopamine fast. I hope this video was helpful for those of you about to take on a dopamine fast or detox. Let me know in the comments down below if you decided to do one and how it went. Besides that, guys, stay tuned.